Behold, the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. Now is the time to trim your lamps and get ready for the coming of the Lord. Stay tuned for the Midnight Cry broadcast with Brother Phil Enlow.
Just turn, if you will, to Mark chapter 9. I had this familiar passage come back to me, and just trust that the Lord will use it to help me and us to be able to lay hold of the things that I believe God desires us to have, things that Jesus shed his blood to purchase for us, and many times we don't enjoy them as we ought. You know, this right before this, you had the occasion at the beginning of this chapter where the Lord took James and Peter and John up to the top of a mountain, and he was transfigured before them. They had this great experience, and it was so amazing. The disciples were so thunderstruck that they reacted the way the way it was their nature to react. And old Peter, he was quick on the trigger, whether he had anything to say or not. And he said, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let's build 3 tents. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." There's a time when we just need to be quiet, isn't there? That Peter showed his nature there. He was going to have something. There wasn't a silence he didn't want to fill. But a lot of times all we need to do is be quiet before the Lord, isn't it? And that's what James and John were doing. They were just sitting there taking all this in, and Peter, he was going to babble something. But anyway, they come down from this great experience in verse 14. There's 3 different accounts of this, and you really get pieces of it from each one, but this is the most complete account. And it says, when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid." Now, I'll just add this in, that in one of the other accounts, it also mentions the devil had oftentimes tried to cast him into the fire and the water to destroy him. So this was a pretty powerful and wicked spirit that is just trying to destroy his son. And so after describing this, he says, "I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "O unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. So this guy has got, well, actually it says what I just said later on this passage too. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." So this is a man in need. This is a man who knows he has a need. It's an overwhelming need. This is something that is not just happened yesterday and it's an inconvenience. This is something that has come to be a great burden in his life. It's a mountain that he hasn't been able to do anything about. It's an impossible situation. It's all of the things that we imagine before which we just throw up our hands and say, "Oh God, I have no answer for this situation. I'm in need." We don't like to feel that way. We certainly like to feel like we're in control and can handle the things that life throws at us, but the truth of the matter is we don't. We can't. The things that matter, we are helpless. And whether we like to feel this way or not, it's God's mercy when we do. Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and the scribes on one occasion, and he said, "The well don't need a doctor, but those that are sick." And it wasn't that the Pharisees were so healthy, anything but they didn't know that they were sick. They didn't feel a sense of their need. Their religion had given them a false sense of security before God, and so they were very confident in that. But here's a man who is just powerless. There's a demon that's taken over his son and done all these terrible things. He couldn't even talk, and he had these terrible fits. And all he could do was to watch, and day by day, by year after year, he saw this terrible need. You know, I believe that there's things in our lives that we can identify with this man. Maybe you don't have this particular situation, but there's not a one of us who has any experience much with the Lord who doesn't have a sense that we need something. There's things in our lives against which we are powerless. We need God. And if you feel that way this morning, you are a blessed person. You are one that God has singled out to deal with, because God alone is the one who can bring us to a sense, not only that we've got problems and we've got needs, but you see, he didn't just feel this vague sense of need and run here and run there. He came to the one that he believed could help him. There was something in him that drew him to Jesus as the only possible solution. Now, I'm sure he'd probably been to the religious leaders. He'd talked to his rabbi or whoever, and they hadn't been able to help him. And he had no doubt been to the doctors, and they tried to, maybe they did what they thought they could, but nothing had worked. And this man just knew that his need was great. You know, I think of Pilgrim's Progress, and remember the beginning of it, you find a man living in a city called Destruction. Name is Christian, but he has this terrible burden on his back, and he just goes around day by day sighing and crying, and oh, how can I get rid of this burden? And what do all his friends and acquaintances do? What's their response? Those of you who may have read the book, they're real sympathetic, right? Yeah, right. They were just mocking and laughing. What's your problem? We're going on a picnic today. We're going to have a big time. We're having a party. Come on, join us. Just get rid of all this moaning and groaning stuff. Let's enjoy life. But he couldn't. There was a burden that he had become aware of, and God had put that on his back so that it would drive him to the source of help. I mean, you think of what the future held for the city of Destruction. Its name tells you. There was a great destruction that was about to fall upon that city. The armies of the King of Heaven were going to come and destroy it. But God wanted to reach in and save that man. If God gives you a sense of your need before God, you need to be rejoicing. We don't react that way. We react with a sense of fear and dread and helplessness, and sometimes it migrates into hopelessness. But God is wanting to deliver us from that, because he has the answer. But you think about what this man had to overcome, and you know, the first thing that you really notice about him is his persistence. You see that in many other accounts, you know, like the man who was crying out to Jesus. Was it Bartimaeus? That's what it was. Blind Bartimaeus was a blind man, and he heard Jesus is passing by. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. He wouldn't shut up.